Hello, BookTube. It's Friday, a dark and rainy Friday here in Boston. Still warm, but I think the storm system that is bringing this persistent rain is the edge of a front that will drop the temperature. So probably we've got a chilly night in store. And because it's a rainy day, dark with rain hitting the windows sideways, perfect for thinking of reading. And that's part and parcel of a Friday Reads anyway. Friday Reads is a venerable BookTube tradition in which we all pause for a minute in our reading and our complaining about the various lockdown conditions in our various countries in order to talk about our reading, what we have read, what we're going to read, that sort of thing. I've never figured out a perfect way to do a standard Friday Reads on this channel because I do nothing other than read. So it's a large amount of books. But one thing that a lot of you have seemed to like is when I assemble a bunch of books that I haven't read yet or that I intend to reread, books that are on my horizon immediately. So I did that. I give you about 10 books that I want to go through today just to show them to you and put them on your radar as well. They aren't necessarily things that I can recommend. I don't think this time around there's anything that I can recommend because I haven't read them yet. So I guess I should start to think about doing follow-up videos to these. But the first one is a modern-day romance novel. Self-published, I believe. It's called Lord of London Town by Tilly Cole. And underneath the contemporary trappings is essentially a Regency story. It's the main female character is well-to-do. She's well-born. She's expecting just to marry some bland husband and have a perfect socialite life for the rest of her life. But tragedy intervenes in her life, emergency intervenes in her life, and throws her together with the young man who has always been a romantic fascination for her, but is decidedly on the other end of the social spectrum. He is a leader of a gang of organized crime, even though he's young. He's got the ruthless talent to do that. And suddenly she needs him, and maybe he needs her in the ways that he didn't imagine, and that is the story. So it takes place in the modern day, but as you can tell, anybody is familiar with romance novels, that's a familiar pattern for the story. It'll, again, I don't think I've ever read this author. It'll entirely be a question of how well it's done. I'm perfectly willing to give it a try. This next one is a memoir. It is a modern political memoir. It's not, in this case, explicitly a Trump book, but it's going to be, I think, no less annoying for all that. This is John Brennan, who's formerly the director of the CIA, and this is his book, Undaunted. Subtitle, the unbelievable subtitle, is My Fight Against America's Enemies at Home and Abroad. Now, the at home part refers to the fact that Brennan is an outspoken critic of Donald Trump. So in that sense, this is a Donald Trump book. But the abroad will be his tenure at CIA and all the various things that he did. And I'm sure that this will have bald, uninteresting prose. Maybe some of those CIA cases and adventures will be interesting. But it's going to be hard for me to swallow my outrage long enough to give this book a fair shake. I intend to do that. But John Brennan should be in jail right now. He lied to Congress about a number of things. And I'm not talking about buried in the subtext of his subjunctive passive tense was perhaps a shading that was a little bit wrong. I'm talking about senators with him under oath asking him, do you spy on people? Do you collect? Do you harvest data from non-suspects, from just Americans in massive quantities? And a whole bunch of other questions, but let's stick with that one. To which he swallowed, looked unblinking at his questioner and said, no, we do not. When he knew that he did, and when his signature was on the paperwork that authorized it. A just flat out bald lie told under oath to the Senate. And not the only isolated example of that either. This is an untrustworthy public servant, someone who is willing to lie in black and white terms, on camera, under oath, and still gets punditry jobs. He's still a talking head on cable news shows. So, and this book, obviously, as you can tell from the subtitle, is going to be one huge parade of arrogant self-justification. without the slightest bit of humility, I am sure, I haven't read this book, I haven't read anything about it, but I'm 100% sure that it will contain nowhere in its length an apology for lying to the American people under oath. When you lie to a senator, you're lying to that senator's constituents. You're lying to the American people. That's what the senator is, or should be. And I'm sure this book will not contain an apology. Anyway, I'm going to read it anyway because we'll see what it's like. And this next one will be an antidote to any frustration I encounter with that. And it will be, it's an illustrated book. There'll be lots of text. I'm hoping that the text is really good. But this is right up my alley. This is by Piers Bizzoni, and it's called The Art of NASA. The illustrations they use to sell their mission. And that is a perfect example. I don't know if you can make that out on the mini-me and on the screen. But that is not an artist's rendition of the lunar landing, of the astronauts walking on the moon for the first time. That's an artist's rendition of what it might have looked like. That illustration took place before the mission. And NASA has been doing this forever. And not just with their manned missions. If they want to visualize sending a probe to the moons of Neptune, they will hire artists to do artist conceptions of what those moons look like. And not just from orbit, but from the ground, where the probes will never go. I have long waited for a really good survey book of the artwork of NASA because it's an unsung thing. It's an amazing thing. I'm guessing from the subtitle of this collection that what prose there is in here will skew towards the practical. That we're not just looking at artist renditions and mock-ups. We're looking at the effect that this artwork had on selling things to the senators who control NASA's budget. I'm willing to take that. A little of that will go a long way. I'm hoping there isn't too much of it, because artwork doesn't need pragmatic justification. And this stuff's beautiful. I know a lot of these pieces, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of pieces in here that I don't know. So I'm all for it, and that will cleanse my palate from John Brennan. And then I will need another palate cleanser, because the next one is probably going to be a trial, not on the level of a major government figure simply lying under oath. Not a shade of meaning, not I meant this when I meant that, but you're asking me a yes or no question. I'm saying no, and the answer is yes, and my signature is on the paper that shows that it's yes, that orders people to do yes, and I'm saying no. And I'm not, wasn't fined, wasn't fired, I'm not in jail. I just... Anyway, this next one is not annoying on quite that level, although I will find it annoying, I'm sure. This is by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, and this is Dune, Duke of Caladan. Another in Brian Herbert's endless necrophilic pimping of his father's literary legacy. This guy has written probably 50 Dune books. Every single nook and cranny, every character's bar mitzvah that you can imagine, this guy has done. In lackluster prose. I hate to say it, is Brian Herbert himself a nice guy, but he and Kevin Anderson together aren't fit to write footnotes for Frank Herbert's prose. And yet, not only do they do this series over and over again, endlessly going back to the well on these things, on writing novels about every single minor and major bit and piece of the Dune stuff that's in Frank Herbert's 5 books, but they very intentionally market these things in order to blur the distinction between the two. Very intentionally they do. So on search engines like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, also on websites, everywhere. They work hard to make people think there is no functional difference between the books written by Frank Herbert and the books written by Brian Herbert that say Dune on them, and that's not true. Frank Herbert's Dune novels are wonderful, steeply intelligent, eloquent, and Brian Herbert's Dune novels are not. They are not ever that, and they can be muddled. And also, thanks to Kevin Anderson, who has this flaw as a writer, they can be awful wordy, awful prosy. Anyway, as you can tell from the title of this book, this is the story of Duke Leto, the father of Paul Muad'Dib. This is the story of Duke Leto on the forest and water world of Caladan, the world of pongy rice and whale sharks and castles where rain patters down on the windows. And this will be the story of Duke Leto and his consort, Lady Jessica, trained by the Bene Gesserit, but he does not take her as his wife. He trusts her more than anyone, but he doesn't take her as his wife because he's hoping to dangle before the other noble houses the idea that someone could marry him, officially. But she is nevertheless the mother of his heir, Paul, and this will also have all of the Atreides supporting characters, Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho and Toofer Howard, and it will be the story of, I don't really know. It'll be the story, I hope that it will be the story at least of what little we know about what this story would be if Frank Herbert had written it. He didn't write it. He could have. He didn't. What little we know about the story is that this is probably the time when Duke Leto is gaining popularity in the Landsrat, where he's gaining popularity among other noble houses that view him as sort of a counterpoint to the Emperor Shaddam IV, that view him as sort of a maverick figure, a valorous figure. And that therefore, in the course of the book, if I were writing it, I wouldn't write it, first of all, but if I were, in the course of the book, I would have him growing as a political rival to the Emperor, which ultimately spawns the Emperor's whole idea of ordering Duke Leto and his family to take over the fiefdom of Arrakis and ordering House Harkonnen out of Arrakis. Specifically because it's a trap. The Emperor is in league with the Harkonnens to spring a trap on House Atreides and destroy it. For one reason is that the Emperor has heard rumors that Duke Leto would like to train up a fighting force as good as the Emperor's private Sardaukar. But two, and much more importantly, because that fighting force is still only in the drawing table when Duke Leto dies in Frank Herbert's novel Dune. Two, and much more importantly, Leto is becoming much more popular. He's becoming a political rival to the Emperor. Someone who could perhaps pose a threat down the line or make demands down the line. That the main dramatic point of this book should be the spawning of the ultimate plot that is the reason why Dune happens. But I have a feeling it's not going to be. I have a feeling that these authors will waste time with romantic shenanigans between Duke Leto and Jessica, with father figure stuff. Maybe the book will start with the old Duke Leto's father, where we learn in Frank Herbert's novel Dune that Duke Leto's father died in a bullfight. He was killed by a bull in a bullfight, and that the family decided to epoxy seal the head of the bull with its horns still covered in blood as a thing to hang on the walls in the banquet halls. That old Duke, the one who originally conscripted the Mentat Toofer Hawat, might figure in here at the very beginning. We might see the bullfight where he dies. That sort of stuff that just... these books must have a following, or they wouldn't continue. There have been like 30 of them. They must have a following. There must be people out there who like these things. I see each one of them, I read each one of them, and I think, oh, no. You don't have to fill in every little detail. You shouldn't. You're watering down. That's what this does. It waters down a literary legacy when you do that. I can't imagine that Brian Herbert doesn't see that. So these books must earn money. But one way or another, I read them all in the hopes that one of them will be good. That has not happened yet, but you never know. This next one I know will be good. This is Gala Moffrey, a collection of essays, reviews, and bits by Joseph Epstein. I have a lot of his books here in this room. This will just be literary essays, literary considerations, and ruminations, that sort of thing. What can we do for the lighting here so that you can see it? There we go. That's what it's going to look like. That might be the best we can do. These things just come out regularly. I wouldn't miss them. I like this writer on writing, and this will probably come in this room along with his other books. I have 4 or 5 of them. Then this next one is contemporary fiction. But you might think that I'm once again throwing a sop to Alex at what page are you on, but it's not his kind of contemporary fiction because it's written by a white man who has possession of his wits, has never been arrested, has all of his limbs, that sort of thing. So the fact that he occasionally writes about gay themes, so what? That's the man these days. This is just an establishment author. I'm not sure that would appeal to anybody who's interested in contemporary literary fiction. There's no, as far as I know, no Nigerian heritage in David Levitt. That's the author here is David Levitt. And this is his new book, Shelter in Place, which has its dramatic impetus in the election of Donald Trump. The book's bravura opening is a group of friends in the immediate minutes later aftermath of the election of Donald Trump as president of the United States. Despite having bragged about committing sexual assault, despite having stalked his female opponent on the stage while obviously high on something. No whites of his eyes, sniffing every 30 seconds, only, and not in my case because of some sort of weird allergy, but because he had coked up on something ahead of the event. And despite the fact that he had gone on many, many state TV-friendly interviews advocating that the United States commit war crimes, kill families, kill non-combatants, kill children, and also steal national products. Those are war crimes. You go to The Hague for that. And having the hosts on those shows just go, because they've never heard a lunatic like this before. But despite all of that, he won. And the main characters in this book at the beginning of it, I believe, are reeling from that and wondering, how far will they go in outrage over that. But I gather from the descriptions that the plot then decamps to Venice, and to a big rambly apartment in Venice. I don't know what that means. I haven't read even a bit of this, but the descriptions that I get of it so far, I'll dig into it this weekend. The descriptions I get of it so far make it sound, even at a distance, make it sound distracted. And that is a natural thing. Any of you who write will know the temptation to get a big dramatic moment like that. Okay, well, I know this scene, these well-to-do friends, in the moments after the worst American in the country is elected president. That scene came fully formed to my mind. I have to write it. And writers often don't resist the temptation to do that, even though they don't actually have a novel to follow that scene, which is why so much contemporary literary fiction will have one great scene, and then the rest of it feels like some sort of stillborn appendage. I'm hoping that doesn't happen in this case. David Levitt is, to put it mildly, an old hand. I'm hoping that he would see that before anybody would, and wouldn't turn in a manuscript that looked like that, that was lopsided like that. But I'm eager to try it. I'm a fan of this author. Then this next one is a memoir. It's a rock and roll memoir. It's Do You Feel Like I Do? It's a memoir by Peter Frampton. He of Frampton Comes Alive. One or two of you will be old enough to remember a novel, an album called Frampton Comes Alive. Sold a quintillion copies. It was everywhere. It was a mega hit of an album, and this Peter Frampton was its star. He starred in a movie version of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and when he was promoting Frampton Comes Alive, and when he was doing all sorts of videos for it, and when he was touring for it, at the time that he was doing that, he was arguably the most attractive young man in the world. And that helped. That certainly helped. And that's why you have that Peter Frampton on the cover of the memoir, even though it's a much older Peter Frampton looking back on his rock and roll life. I, of course, object to the cover. Smoking as a synonym for deep thought. Smoking as a synonym for sincerity or validity of some kind. Absolutely hate it. Absolutely hate it. Might as well have a gun pointed to his head. And if you did that, people would say, "Oh, why are you doing that? That's dangerous." But here, it just continues to glamorize the thing that will certainly kill Peter Frampton. That is annoying to me, obviously annoying to me. And another thing that might be annoying, I won't know until I try the book, is that rock and roll memoirs so often tend to be wimpy. You get these people who have developed a reputation. They have a reputation of being, hard-living, modern gunslingers out on the road doing whatever they want. But when it comes time later on for them to write their memoirs, they pull all their punches. Peter Frampton was in every room where absolutely horrible things took place and outrageous things with enormous names. And if any of that comes in this book, I will be amazed. Absolutely amazed. I don't know how many of these things I've read where that just doesn't happen. Where instead it's sanitized. You get a sanitized memoir by the very last kind of person you would ever expect to sanitize anything. I'll have to hope that this is written with Alan Light. I'll have to hope that this book doesn't do that. But to put it mildly, I'm expecting to be disappointed. I'm expecting that this will just be anodyne. This next one is a novel, and it's experimental fiction, but I couldn't care less. I absolutely love it. I am pretty sure that I will love this. This is Alexandria by Paul Kingsnorth, the author of The Wake, a book that I came out recently enough so that I believe I was talking about it on this channel years and years ago. And The Wake takes place in a world that probably is post-apocalyptic or pre-apocalyptic. Something is definitely out of kilter in that world. But the amazing thing about The Wake is that Kingsnorth decided to create a language and write the whole book in that language. It reminded me, and the premise reminded me a lot of Ridley Walker. And it's amazing. It's amazing. You would think that would annoy me enough to just make me hurl the book across the room, but instead, it was amazing. You have to grapple with that language. You have to learn it in order to read the book. But I wholeheartedly recommend it because, as I said many times once I did learn it, there is an actual intelligent book in The Wake once you have gotten to the point where you can read it. And this, I guess, from what little I've read of it, is a kind of thematic sequel, a kind of finisher to the Wake went on to The Beast, and then there's this thing, a kind of final visit to this weird post-apocalyptic, pre-apocalyptic world. It wouldn't matter to me if it were just a grocery list. I am sold on this author. Anything he writes, I will read. But I'll give it a try. Absolutely, I'm eager to do it. Then we have the gays. You can't do a Friday Reads without the gays. You have to satisfy them, or you'll never hear the end of it. And this is contemporary gay fiction. This is by Parker St. John, and it is the first book in the Down Home series called Down Low. There is our requisite tight-shirted hero. This is a story about a bull rider, a champion bull rider, who uses his success in bull riding to get out of his little town. This is the number one reason for leaving, for getting out of his little town, where he has been violently in love with the preacher's kid, but where he doesn't feel like he could ever belong. So he goes out on the road, doesn't find a whole lot of personal satisfaction there, and eventually is catastrophically injured and has to go back home. So whether Parker St. John knows it or not, this book is partaking of a long tradition of gay fiction, of going home. That the gay person who flies too close to the sun and eventually has to go back home, where all of the rooms look the same, where all the intolerance is still in place, where all of the broken hearts are still bleeding. That is a very common thing in gay fiction. It was worked right into the ground at the height of the AIDS epidemic, for instance, because a lot of young gay men had left their cloistered Bible Belt towns in order to go to LA or New York in order to be themselves. Then they get sick and they have to go back home. But this is contemporary gay fiction. This is, I think, self-published. So I don't think we're going to have to worry about deep literary significance here. I have a feeling instead that what's going to happen is that our main character is going to hook back up with the preacher's kid. And explosively. So we shall see. The plot description seems to go in that direction, which makes me wonder how much research Parker St. John has done when it comes to bull riders and their injuries. Usually those injuries are pretty severe. Usually you aren't doing Sean the Book Maniac style gymnastic throbbing between the sheets if you have been injured in bull riding. We shall see. If I were writing a book like this, certainly I would put in a few days of intense research into bull riding. Just to make sure I get it all right. But we shall see. Won't take long to read. And then the last one that we're going to do here is supernatural thriller. This is an author I've mentioned on this channel before. I praised him. This is John Connolly. And this is a Charlie Parker novel called The Dirty South. I think comes out in December. I think this comes out in December. Charlie Parker is a fantastic character. This is a fantastic series. Beautifully written. In addition to everything else, it's written much better than it needs to be written in order to do what it does. I think that's one of the things its fans love about it. This is like the 16th or 17th book in the Charlie Parker series, and it is what Charlie Parker fans have waited for a long time, which is an origin story. This goes back in time to tell us how the character became the formidable figure that he is in the course of the series. That's fine by me. Again, this could be just Charlie Parker doing a jigsaw puzzle, and I would read it. But this isn't going to be that. This is going to be finally an origin story for this character. So that's fantastic. I would read anything in this series. So I'm not sure of the exact date of this, but I'm going to dive into it this weekend, and so that I'll be ready for it. And there you go. That is a kind of a smattering of Friday Reads for today, for mid-October. And as usual with Friday Reads, I'm curious to know what you're reading today and this weekend. What's on your immediate radar? I'd love to hear about that, especially if maybe it's something that I might be interested in reading myself. So feel free to sing out in the comments field. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up. That is my closest approximation of a Friday Reads. Those are some of the things I'm going to be diving into today and this weekend. But I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.